All right, and we're live now. All
Sweet.
right. Doot. So everybody, welcome to Feature Disabled. I have a new camera, so I'm not used to looking at it. I have Kat with me today from Get Stark. Woo! Uh, yeah, welcome. I'm so
Hey,
glad to have you
hey.
on my show.
I'm glad to be here, though I will say you look very fancy with your camera and uh and I think I look like with especially with the posters and everything, I look very techish. Um so I'm feeling a little techie right now.
I have the, requisite lots of books behind me.
Nice. Oh, radical candor. Yeah, I see quite a few back there.
Yes, I like all my like queer library is lent out right now.
That's good. That's good. You said it's lent out?
Yes,
Good.
one of our friends was like, do you have any books on gender? And I was like, do I ever?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
That's good.
the pandemic reading list, I was like, I need a pen that says like local queer librarian or something like that.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, cool. No, that's good to know. I was going through yesterday, I was looking to order for a few people that I know a bunch of books for kids around the topic of racism, or in particular anti-racism. And I was bummed to see, but at the same time, very happy to see that they're all sold out. Um, and so yeah, so I've like checked. So obviously there's Amazon, last resort, but I've checked local bookstores and everything, and they're out. And I was just like, man, this is good. I'm happy about that. So yeah,
Oh no, they'll have to print more.
yeah, exactly. So so I was, and I think so the local bookstores obviously don't. I feel like they don't really give a lot of them don't really give that information on when they'll be back in stock, but at least on Amazon you can see, oh, like this in particular book is temporarily out of stock. It'll be back here, on this time period. So that's nice to see, and you can kind of like get informed of that. Um, but yeah, obviously, if you can buy from a local bookstore, do that over the big giant. Yeah,
Yes, especially if it is owned by a person of color.
exactly. Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh goodness. Ab- oh,
Oh, I know it's
about
so
me.
hard.
About me. What about me? I feel like I feel like when you talk to everybody, they're like, "Oh, you're a very interesting person," and it's flattering. And then like imposter syndrome like floods me, and I'm just like, I'm not interesting at all. I'm quite boring. Um, no, I mean, so I'm a designer. Anybody who knows me, I think, in the community knows that by trade I'm a designer. Self-taught. I went to school as a bio major with the intent to end up as a pediatric neurosurgeon. So you can see how I nailed that. And but yeah, designer by trade, self-taught, and I've I've worked in startups, I've worked in agencies, I've done the freelance joy, and yeah, and then ended up as a founder and now CEO of Stark. I'm a proud mama. Um, yeah, I'm that. I have a daughter and a fur baby. Ginger is my dog. Um, yeah, what about me? I like to read. That's what you'll find me doing in my spare time. I'm a reader. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. What else? What else? I don't know. I don't know.
Have you picked up any pandemic hobbies? Like something that you just started doing since you've been unable to go interact with people socially?
Yeah, unfortunately, working more. It's a bad hobby. No, but a hobby. I think I wouldn't say hobby as much as habit.
Hmm.
Um, just because we're juggling homeschool, with an almost 5-year-old, plus work, uh, staying obviously healthy on our own. But like I think in that regard, I've spent most of my time not really doing hobby as much as it is like trying to maintain good habits, because of the fact that we're not working as much, we're working more. If that makes sense. And I think
Mhm.
like anybody who's watching this will probably be able to understand that. And so making sure that I'm I'm staying fit and healthy, and so I'm usually working out a few times per week. Um, Trying to maintain some normalcy in terms of my habit, my work habits, like when I stop, and making sure I'm not doing so until 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, and then have to get up at 6, 7, and be on parent duty. Um, so yeah, I think that's majority of what my quarantine has been like.
Yeah, I relate to that. I've been having these moments where I'm like, well, there's really just so many things I could be working on right now. So I feel the need to like stay
Mm-hmm.
up later and later. And then
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, I could sleep until I like absolutely have to get up like 30 minutes before I have to be on a call or like to start working. So I'm like sleeping until like 9 o'clock so I can,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, this is terrible for me.
Yeah. No, it's
But
horrible.
yeah, so I'm staying up until like 2 o'clock at night and getting up at 9 and working until like 12 or 1. It's horrible.
Yeah. And I say that knowing good and well that like it needs to be precursored with the fact that I'm very grateful that I even have the position, like the role that I do in the first place, and that we as a family um are just overall secured. Um uh, but it's a little tough.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I think what happens as longer I stay like kind of sequestered, which I don't really have much of a choice because we're still on lockdown in New York and also
Yeah.
autoimmune issues. So I'm not gonna risk that.
Not worth it.
Yeah, it's not worth it. I think what happens is, like I feel like I have to work harder because to
Mhm.
get the same amount of productivity
Yeah.
because there's not that same rest of like your brain and that sort of thing. And I think we kind of discount that sometimes as a society that we really value the optics of
Mhm.
working and the amount of hours that we put into work rather than the amount of like I guess value that
Yeah.
we that
Yeah,
we
yeah.
put in.
Yeah, but I think that's a byproduct. That I mean, one thing I always talk about is how in any organization, the fish rots from the head down. And so, um, all of that extra work, that extra requirement of that from leadership is them compensating. And so you see this with like the hovering art director and like that like macho boss. Um, and And so I think it's really just compensation for something. What that is, I don't know, but yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations are falling victim to that. Um, but um, on a good note, I'm happy to see that more organizations are becoming remote now. And I think that there's a learning curve. Obviously, you can't mirror one to one in office and remote work. It doesn't work that way. Uh, but I'm glad that at least something has spearheaded the conversation, and is making organizations uncomfortable to the point where they have to like revisit what this looks like for them. And for some, it's not going to work out well, and that's for like a myriad of reasons. But I'm glad to see that generally organizations are. Um, Doing what they can to, understand the struggle that their employees are facing. I mean, across the board, because it's important to remember we went from one pandemic um, into the unlifting of the veil of I think our country's biggest pandemic, and so I think it's important to remember that we have like coasted through a lot in the last few months.
Yeah, I think one thing that has really been revealed to me is that, it's not just a US problem. It's
Yeah.
a worldwide problem that um, i- I've been seeing videos from like Argentina as well, and from the
Mm,
UK of people being like, this isn't just a US problem. Racism is everywhere. Police brutality is everywhere. So I do think that it's a problem that is going to be hard to solve, and it's ongoing, but it's something that is worth solving. So
mhm, mhm. No,
yeah.
absolutely. It's been really fascinating to see other countries get involved and stand up. And there are a ton of countries around the world, aside from the US, obviously, that experience this problem. It's been really, really eye-opening to see countries like the Netherlands jump in and Germany jump in, where like I kind of I mean, having lived in Germany for a number of years, I joke and say how their police department is so bored that they fine you for jaywalking, and so it's been good to see that. I also think Germany is a clear example of a country that has gone through a lot of what we're going through right now, and I cross my fingers that we do not reach that level. Um, but I think there's a lot to learn from them, and I think if anything, it's like, hey, pay attention to what they're doing and what they're talking about, and listen to them, and so. Um, that doesn't mean that they don't have work to do in terms of diversity. Um, Having said that, I think the conversation from their end is um, significantly um, different than it is here. Um, yeah. Mm,
So talking about societal differences, I did want to ask you about we were going to talk about a little bit society and how it perceives disability.
yeah.
I think it would be. I was talking with another guest the other week about the kind of the way that we kind of split hairs over what's considered kind of normative and what's considered pathological, and how we place disability on that scale.
Hmm.
I think that varies from like place to place and culture to culture. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. And I know that you're doing some work at Stark to kind of like change the language around that as well. Do you
Yeah.
mind sharing a bit about that?
Yeah. So I think like it goes back to so I think we can look at what happened yesterday, where GitHub came out and said that they were changing like main branch to the label to main branch instead of master, and you and this is a it seems like a very small change, but then when you look at how deeply embedded like racism um, and hate speech against anyone that isn't white is baked into our lexicon. You realize how those small changes lead up to a big goal. And so, everything from like main instead of master to like on Stark, what we did was change the default or like original artboard that you have from, we originally had it as normal to original, um, because it we never want anything we say or the language we use to feed into any stigma or hate or give anybody a reason to think that there is a um, difference in who we are as and who we present as humans simply because we identify personally or outward, based on the color of our skin or who we choose to bow down to pray to. Um, you know, uh, and that's a reason to be treated differently. And so um so that was something we did. And then, yesterday, on Twitter, I shared something about the term grandfathered in, the grandfather clause, and
Mhm.
how a lot of people don't realize that it's completely rooted in racism, and that its origin was, to essentially ensure that, in these like half a dozen states in the South, they could kind of like use this gray area and skirt around the 15th Amendment to ensure that African Americans could not vote. Still, they did not have a vote. And so it was like this grandfather clause that they put in. And so obviously I can sit here and talk to you about this forever, but all of that to say, you don't realize that so many of these things that we say on a regular basis, that on the surface they seem harmless. Oh yeah, I'm grandfathered into that phone plan. You would never think that it's anything rooted in racism, but that's part of the problem, is that it's become so quote unquote normal. It's the
Mhm.
default. Um, and and when your normal is toxic,
Mhm.
that's when it's a problem. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that for it's been interesting, to see and learn about like language in general on a like a culture, like on a global scale culturally. And so like you can go, like if you speak to like someone here, for instance, and a man addresses a woman and says like, "Hey ma," and like to some people it's offensive. Like you'd be like, but in another country, it's actually very honorable. It's a sign of respect. And so you're just like, well, how do you even how do you even handle this? Like, how do you handle that conversation? Like, what does that look like? But I think this all starts with education, right? Um, and so I think part of the big problem is that, especially in this country, there's so much um, that goes unspoken or untaught, and I myself knew, um, like not even a fraction of what I do now. You know, um, before actually traveling the world and embedding myself in different cultures, there was so much that I didn't know, um, and and it's been really, really enlightening to just completely see the way other cultures operate. And that's why, like, I think for us at Stark, it seems silly, or it seems like maybe to some nonsensical, but for us, it's a big goal to have a team that's completely spread out around the world, because we firmly believe that like we can't create a product that allows you to build your products efficiently in whatever country you're in, if we're not there with you, if we're not,
Mhm.
on the ground having these conversations with you, learning about the culture, or someone who's born and raised in that culture, um, to be like, hey, this actually doesn't work in A, B, and C country. This is not a good word to say. This is that. And so yeah, that's how, we're thinking about it. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah, I mean, I think about it too, like things that are rooted in ableism
yeah,
or homophobia as well.
yeah,
Like people call into question like people's security in their gender because
mhm,
like and because of sexuality, like
yep,
using slurs on video gaming because and saying like uh are you gay, but sometimes they use a slur to say it because and then
yeah,
it calls into question their gender. Like talking about people being willfully ignorant
yeah,
and saying like you would have to be blind to not understand this, and I'm like, no, I know people that are deaf blind that
hmm,
understand better what's going on.
yeah, yeah,
This takes some serious centering and selfishness. Like
yeah.
that's something that's completely different. Like people that have disabilities don't choose to have disabilities.
For sure.
They just have disabilities. Like
Hmm,
we just exist. And
hmm,
it's just it's really interesting to me how that language evolves and how people just like since I have lost some of my vision and like since 2016 going in the world and like being in a workplace where people are like, oh, like we don't want to be blind to this, and I'm just like, oh, whoa, like it suddenly hits you in the face all the time almost.
Hmm.
And like I've learned to kind of change my language around that and be like, oh, well, we don't want to be unperceptive. Oh, well,
Yep.
we don't want to we don't want to be perceived a certain way, or
There you go. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
because I also think like it's knowing the other person, right? Too, is that I think there are some people that just have no idea, and like you
mhm.
can see that they're you can have someone that is completely advocating for everyone's rights and really standing there with you hand in hand, but then these things, certain words are tossed out, and I think it's just it's like it's literally all you know. But I think those are also the people that are willing to be like, correct me if you see that. Be like, hey, call me out on that. Because it's not. I think for a number of people, it's not ill intent, depending on what you're talking about, depending
Oh,
on the topic.
absolutely.
It's not ill intent. But then there's other things like benevolent racism, and you're just like, come on, friends,
Yeah.
come on.
Uh,
Let's go,
well,
pals. Get your shit together. Oh, am I
I
allowed to say
think
shit?
oh yeah, no, you can
Okay.
say
Okay.
whatever. I had one person on my show that used dropped the F bomb, so it's totally cool.
I'm
This is
not
not
there
a safe
yet.
for
Let us.
children.
We're ramping up to it. We're ramping up. Anyone who's listened to me at any point knows that, like, we're how many minutes in, and I'm game right now. So,
So I think like the next level for me is self-policing, or oh no, I
yeah,
don't even want to use that word.
yeah,
Self-regulating. There we go.
yeah.
See, I'm doing it myself. I'm self-regulating. I'm saying I want to
There
remove
you
that
go.
word from my vocabulary. And I
Hmm.
did that last night as well, because I think a lot of the language that we use, sometimes we don't realize that we need to remove it from our vocabulary until it comes out of
Yeah.
our mouth.
Hmm.
And then it's like, oh no, I don't no, I need to not use that anymore, because I hadn't said some a phrase about like it was something that's said really commonly, and it's rooted in racism and it's about cooking. And I was like, oh yes,
Hmm.
I was working over a hot stove,
Hmm.
and I was
Okay.
like, yeah, yeah, and I was like, yeah, and I was just like was talking to one of my friends, and I was like, wait, nope, got to remove that from my vocabulary right now.
Hmm.
Like I
Hmm.
haven't said that in years, and I had no
Hmm.
reason to say it. And I was like, nope, got to do it. And so I think, being anti-racist isn't about being perfect. It's about and like being anti-ableist and being like a good advocate for other communities that you're not a part of, and even for your own community.
Hmm.
Like I mess up
Yeah.
about like trans rights stuff sometimes. It's not about being perfect. It's about like getting to the point where you decenter yourself and think about
Yeah.
other people and start self-regulating.
Yeah. Well, I think that's also part of the thing, right? Is that you're asking people to look at themselves, which is, I can tell you, as someone who's done a lot of work in that department, it gets ugly. And a lot of people are not willing to do that work. But having said that, there are a number of people, a lot of people around the world that are and that are working hard toward that now, which I'm happy to see. But I definitely think it takes a lot of white people in particular to turn into their own village and be like, hey, this ain't it, chief.
Oh, that's also a great meme. Yeah, I feel like there's a bunch of people that I've run into that are white that want to tell us like these are things that you don't need to be worried about. Like you don't need to be worried about these small things. Like if we say we don't turn a deaf ear, or don't be blind to this, or
Don't be
you
blind to it.
know, yeah, or like calling Trump crazy or something like that.
Yeah. Hmm.
That's ableist,
Hmm.
because like
I have a
somebody
question for you. I
sure,
have a question for you on that.
yeah, tell
Like,
me.
when it comes to when it comes to that conversation around him in particular and the actions, and if you wanted to go far back as to talk, like, we can talk about Hitler for a second too. I mean,
Sure.
at this point, put him in the same fucking camp. And for me, it's, do you are you allowed to describe, or is anyone allowed to describe Hitler's behavior as insanity?
So my personal stance on this, and I'm not gonna like regulate other people that
Yeah,
have
for sure,
mental illness because I'm not
for
gatekeeping
sure.
like that. But I think that people that should like be allowed to self-identify.
Yeah.
So like access to mental health care is super, super hard.
Mhm,
I've spent some months trying to get access to a psychiatrist
mhm,
just so I can get treatment for like ADHD.
mhm,
And like I'm ending up paying like $400 a visit out of pocket, which is just
mhm.
wild.
In this
In
country,
this, yeah,
it's important to precursor that in this
in the
country.
US
Yeah,
with insurance. Yeah,
yep,
through my employer.
yeah,
This is not like Obamacare or
yeah.
Affordable Care Act or
Oh, drives me
yeah.
nuts.
Yeah, and I work for a great company, but there's just
Mhm,
like no availability of
mhm,
psychiatrists that are in network with a lot of plans because a lot of them are out of network or not accepting new patients
mhm,
for months. And I have to see somebody that accepts transgender patients as well that will write letters and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it's like super specific, I know. But in any case, but this is, close to New York City.
mhm,
Uh, so I don't think that it's ethical to armchair diagnose, especially like
yeah,
so you have to like be a professional to diagnose someone, and then you have to be seeing them professionally. And then it's not ethical to share those diagnoses.
mhm,
So I think that we could say his behavior doesn't make sense. It's wild, it's ridiculous, there's a lot of words we could use to describe it besides insanity, but
mhm,
because there are a lot of people that are mentally ill
mhm.
or have mental health
Yeah,
problems that don't commit violent crimes,
for
they
sure.
don't commit atrocities, they're more likely to be the victims of atrocities. Like 50% of people that are arrested by police and military have mental illnesses
Yeah,
or some
of
sort of
some form.
disability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's more likely that they will be the victim of that violence.
yeah,
So I think that it kind of does them a disservice to just
mm,
say like people that are violent and people that are, disruptive or just bad actors are mentally ill. You know.
mhm,
So I feel like some people like to use that as a cloak to say I can get away with behaving however I want because I'm mentally ill. Like
mhm,
that's not to say that there aren't people that are mentally ill and are bad actors.
mhm,
I had, like an ex that would be like, "Well, I'm not going to take my medicine." And like I'm also going to, like say and do things that are really shitty, and I think, there could be two things that came into play there, but mental illness and also being a bad actor.
mhm,
It's just, yeah, I want to be like really careful about that because it's really hurtful to people that do suffer, especially from personality disorders, because then they feel like there's
for
a
sure,
lot of stigma
for
that
sure.
people are just going to call them crazy and think
Mhm,
that like they're never going to really like be able to fit into society and be productive. And uh,
right.
yeah, it makes people think they aren't reliable or safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely understand. Yeah. I'm glad I clarified, because I mean, it's obviously, it's easy to, it's easy to say, like, Hitler was fucking insane. And the thing is, nobody said he was.
He was
Um,
definitely
no,
evil.
no, right. That's the thing. Like, he was evil. He was I don't know if he was or wasn't
Hmm.
clinically diagnosed as anything. Um, and but I do know that he's evil, and the things that he did. If he wasn't clinically diagnosed with anything, then he was someone that's was completely powered and fueled by power, and what he could do with it. And obviously, there's something that has gone wrong in his life in some form of fashion that has caused him to be there, whatever event or events were, those events were. But whether or not um, it is a mental illness or disorder or disability or what have you is not in existence from, I think, what anybody understands.
Yeah, and kind of bringing that back to like whiteness and white supremacy, I've heard a lot of theories from some really great Black academics on how like people's proximity and like their tolerance for violence, it just kind of like depends on like how you were exposed to things growing up and like what
Yeah.
your beliefs are. And like people that are Christians like read the Bible, and like their beliefs around like what happened in the Bible are different from like what their actual held values are. So it's like there's all these like different compounding issues with how people feel about violence and value, and then like actual real life sort of actions. So
Yeah,
it's
when
really
once you yeah,
complicated.
it's layered. It's for sure layered. I think proximity in general, getting proximate to things that matter are completely necessary. I think even the whole like, what, you know, how they're raised is, what they'll become. It's just I no. There's so many factors, there's so many layers that are involved in this conversation. And um, there are so many pipelines that lead one person to one route than the other. And obviously in this country, um, the prison pipeline is one of the largest, and in turn is also one of the most profitable for businesses because it is privatized. And so yeah, it's not this like um, one size fits all. Um, but what I do know is that citizens here, particularly um, Black people and people of color in general, are um, are often left out of the conversation. And I think citizens here in this country, do not get their hierarchy of needs met.
Hmm.
And I think when that's the case, you also have a very different conversation um, because there's not even a baseline to work off of. Um, yeah, it's it's loaded. It's
Definitely.
ugly. It's. Um, I went on a massive rant about a week ago about the correlation between um, educational funding to certain communities and how low literacy has a direct correlation to crime, to prison, and how um, there's just it's just this repeated behavior that happens even though it's so blatant what it's causing um, and and still um, and still despite that um, people of color work twice 10 times 100 times as hard um, and and it's amazing to see, amazing in the worst ways, to see how the government will do everything in their power to ensure that um, they knock you down as much as possible. And that's the thing, the system's designed that way. It is intentional. Um, yeah, yeah,
So shifting gears just a little bit. I
mhm,
know we don't have like unlimited time. So I want to you I know we could go on forever and ever about systemic issues.
yeah.
Um, what is Stark up to lately, and what are you trying to do to move the needle on at least trying to move the perception of or I'm sorry, what are you trying to do to move the needle on helping people with disabilities and that intersection?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you were to ask me what we do, like, we have that, like the one liner that you spew out at everybody that, we are a suite of tools helping software teams build these like continually accessible and legally compliant products more efficiently. Um, and for us, the the goal has always been to put these tools in the hands of the people that are doing this work, um, and at the same time educate them. Um, and I think that that's the only way it really does work. Is to you know in order we need to do that in order for you to create products that are accessible because they're inherently inclusive, right? Accessibility is a byproduct of inclusive design. And so, how do we create tools that enable that, that enable you to do this work, that put you in a position where you don't know whether or not you got so fucking good at your job or like Stark is just powering you through and helping you there. Um, and and that because you're educated, you are a better professional at this work. You can better serve not only in your job but the community that you're catering to. And so, for us, it's like always creating this. I think a lot of the solutions that are in the space right now are completely fragmented. They have dated technology and in turn dated thinking. And like one hand washes the other two hands wash the face, right? And so um, I think we, one thing we did from the very beginning was built this for the community and with the community. And I think it's important to remember that it's not just the people that are on a software team that we built this with. When we first were building the contrast checker, um, and the simulator, we were working with individuals that were either blind or colorblind, or have some form of like tunnel vision. And so it was like, we can't build these tools for people to do this better work if we're not working with the individuals that are inherently affected by the positive or negative change in the products that they'll be using as consumers. And so, we did that from the very beginning. And I think because of that now, we have a community and also an educational stack in the pipeline that is second to none. It's the most grand community, and I'm ridiculously grateful for it. Um, but all of that to say, I think there's this foundation that needs to be provided, and so I think for us that's the big goal, is to be this like gold standard in this space. But um, we were only able to do that because we have community powering everything that we do, and that we're not letting anyone say like, hey, technology doesn't allow you to do that. Like, we can land on the fucking moon. Don't tell me that we can't do this. And so, um, yeah, I think at the risk of maybe stirring up a little, stirring the pot a little bit. Um, I think there's a, in the space right now, I think there's a lot of gatekeeping that happens, and I think it doesn't leave room for kind of new voices and fresh thinking. Um, and I think you get that in any space, right? But I think it's about time we got out of like the 1990s. in our technology. I think like there's no reason why companies should be walling off technology and not enabling it to be as inclusive and as accessible. And I think when you think about access, it's easy to think things like wheelchair, deaf, blind. Um, but I think we also need to drill down to the root of access, like who can access this or not for a myriad of reasons, right? And so that's our focus, is like really being end to end with this, suite of tools, and arming you with that, making it ridiculously easy to do so, um, helping you lean on like a lot of these ancillary benefits that come with Stark, so you can do your job better. Um, but giving you a crowd of people that say, hey, we know that this is really fucking hard. We know that often this is not human readable, so we're going to make it human readable. And we're going to help answer these questions because we're just like another rando from the community that also had these problems, and I figured out the answer, and now I can give it to you. Um, and taking that and distilling it into content and guidelines and whatever, just to make your job easy, because that's what happened in the first place for us. That's why version like -5 of Stark even existed, was because we needed a solution to do our jobs right. And it was just like, why is compliance so fucking hard? Why it doesn't need to be. There doesn't need to be this, like, these long-winded debates about humans, and how to, like, I feel like that's part of the problem with like the DSM too, right? Is that like there's so before I like nerd out on this, the DSM, for people who are watching, is a diagnostics manual. And so it makes it easier for doctors and physicians and therapists, so on and so forth, to create a label around um, anything, so that they can know how to administer or how to move forward with treatment or whatever. And Soren, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I feel like in this space it's very similar, in that we get so caught up in these in like boxing people in and boxing ideas in, that it stops us from being able to cater solutions from the people that we're boxing in. Um, and and I think it also forces us to put people into boxes they do or don't belong in. And it gets real confusing. All that say, it gets real confusing real fast. Instead of just being like, hey, here's the problem, um let's just have like a version 1 conversation about what this looks like as a solution. Um and I think it goes back to like Microsoft's message of, like, when everyone gets to play, we all win. And I think that's the case. I think a lot of people in the space use individuals with disabilities, or um, people that don't look like them, as like a marketing ploy, and like aren't building with these people. And I think it's reflected in the product. I think you can feel it in the character and the soul of a product, that it's like ruined, if you will. I don't want to say it's ruined, but it's like wrong. Um, and so, yeah, I don't know if I'm like speaking out of my ass and that's why you're laughing, but
No, no. I totally agree, because there's this there's this gap. So like one of my big gripes with like dating platforms is they come out with this huge
yes,
thing.
yep,
They're like, oh, we're making it more
yeah,
inclusive, because we used to ban transgender people because like
yeah,
cis men would report trans women on here, or
yeah,
cis men would report MBs as being like
yeah,
fake profiles. So they were like, okay, great. We're going to give you your own labels and we're not going to report you. But what they
Mm.
do is they give you basically what I call a vanity plate.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we're gonna let you put your own right and gender, and maybe we'll give you like a drop down that has some predefined ones or auto completes or whatever. But then after you put that in, we're gonna ask you to pick one or the other. Would you like to
Yeah.
show up in results for men or women? And I'm like, both?
Yeah. Yeah.
Neither?
Like, what?
Like,
Yeah. So we started writing a because full disclosure, I've never been on a dating app before. I've never used one. I don't know if
congrats.
it's like I don't know if it's like so I have a thing. Um I don't know. I told like we started this off, and I told you I'm like not an interesting person, and I wasn't lying. Like I wish people would understand that. Like I'm just gonna tell you what I think, and that's that. I'm not. I promise you, I'm not lying. But I've never been on one, but I'm absolutely fascinated by dating apps. I think the world of I'm fucking weird. I told you. And so dating apps fascinate me because there's so much that is boiled into them, right? Like there's so much of us as people, what makes us tick. Um, like you see the best and worst of someone on a dating app, and so for me, it was like, well, how does this, how do dating apps impact individuals with disabilities? And so,
Mm,
so I put something out there on Twitter, and I asked that question, and I got a lot of people that private messaged me, and gave me those answers. And so, we put together a blog post about this that I'm like still skimming, and then writing. But for me, it was fascinating to see that not only what digital, like online dating looks like for individuals with disabilities, but how that translates to offline once that like the progression happens. Um, and also like at what point do you disclose that? Is it initially? Is it like on like chat three? Is it on date three? Is it like, so all of these different things. And so again, these things that like, you know, uh, you know, Joe Schmo doesn't have to worry about, because everything is just like, yeah, great, you tick off all the boxes. And so yeah, that's it's really fascinating to me. And so yeah, I think I think I think the conversation is much further than what it was. Um, I think people are very aware of just the different lexicon, the different labels, the different ways that we need to do our job now. And it's not that it's different, it's the way that we always should have been doing it, but it's different from what we know. And so for us, it's like how do you deliver that message? How do you deliver that information? Um, and I think you do it by baking it into the tools that people are using on a regular basis, the place that they live for majority of the day. And the main verse master is a great example. Um, I don't know how anybody thought that was a good fucking idea.
yeah.
Um,
I agree because like if you get ready to export a document, there's all these drop downs that remind you what settings to select. So you've got to,
mhm,
like even if you're just exporting something from Illustrator or Sketch, or you're making a PDF, like it asks you like what resolution, what kind of size, what all this stuff. Like accessibility should be like that. The stuff that you can automate should be
mhm.
automated so that it just
Sure
runs.
should. Sure should. And I also think that there are things that, again, in the controversial department, I think but I mean, fuck it. There are things that people should not, with where technology is going, there are things that people should just have done for them. I think that humans are responsible for a lot of fuck up. And so if technology can take over that while informing them, like, hey, here's what's going on, I think that makes for a much better experience, because you spend more time allowing the person to kind of continue doing their work. Um, and then just being like, hey, here's what's wrong. Here's why it's wrong. Do you want to correct it? So it's like, here, we've done this, we've armed you with the information. Do you want to be an asshole, or do you want to just go back to doing what you were doing? And I say that knowing good and well that at one point I was said asshole. And it was because I wasn't educated. I had no idea about any of this. And so, yeah, I think, like, we see this with cars, right? Automobiles are, well, now in this country, COVID is the leading health risk. If we really want to be honest, racism should be up on that list, but government. And so when you look at it, automobiles accidents are a leader in terms of death rates. And so um, self-driving cars.
Mm.
Autopilot was made by an individual with a disability so that they could make their life a lot easier. And it's just like, this, if you remove humans as much as possible, you almost like get to your destination in a much more smooth and streamlined way. And
I'm
so it's like striking this balance, like never shaming. Like that's one thing we never want to shame you. Um, and like it's one of those things where I'm sitting here talking. It's like I'm calling you an asshole because I love you, and because and
exactly.
because like and, but I'm also someone that's just like I'm very blunt. I think I like have a very high benchmark for our team. We all have it. I have a high benchmark for our community. I think at this point, that this exists. There's no excuse. But I do fully understand that the tools until recently were not there for you to do this work. And so it's like, all right, well, now that's changing. But I think there's a happy balance that can be struck in order to do this really good work. It's really important.
So I keep having this self-driving car conversation over and over and over again. My partner is taking a class, and there's some people in this class that don't think that human intervention is like a really great thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh no, like self-driving cars, it might have more accidents because like Y2K and all this other kind of stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
do they realize that like the algorithms that coordinate planes at major airports is already like basically doing just that? Like
Mhm.
humans can't coordinate as many flights as we have going over the US right now without them all crashing into each other.
Yeah. And I mean, I have a friend who's a pilot, and he's like, "Yeah, I just use my iPad when we're up there." And I'm like, "Oh, that's fantastic. That's exactly what I wanted to know.
Well,
Thank you." But it's true. It's true. Like
yeah.
it's all autopilot. But also, I think it's important to know that. And I was just having this conversation. If we're talking algorithms and data sets that have existed before, they're more than likely biased in some way.
Yeah.
If you're not starting fresh, which I'm not going to really lead into too much, but we're working with some stuff, and it's a fresh data set. And so like, again, if you're building these data sets um, with these intentions at the forefront, very aware, consciously aware of these biases that happen, I think you have a different world. Again, building it for the community with the community.
Yep. I agree. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's a huge problem, I think, when we have a large number of white cishet guys that are the ones that have the veto or approve power.
Mhm.
And so we're trying to push like accessibility and like pro black, pro people of color, pro LGBTQ
Mhm.
policies and design, and at the top we have this like a row of homogeny, and yeah, that's something that I think might change, but it has to be conscious.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be conscious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I also think like again, it goes back to the fish rots from the head down.
Mhm.
Like when you look at everything going on, um, the only way it works is if you burn it to the fucking ground and you start from scratch. And you need to, it's easy to say like, oh yeah, that police officer was fired or that politician was fired, and it was like, well, who's firing the asshole that hired him or her or whatever? Like, who is firing the person that hired them?
Mhm.
Um, and then who is firing the person that makes the laws that said that this was okay? And so you see quickly how it goes up, 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 um, and then it becomes, well, who's hiring the people that won't make this decision again? Um, yeah, that was a lot of mumbo jumbo. Sorry.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. So in our last couple of minutes, do you want to talk about anything that you've got coming up on the horizon?
Um, yeah, sure. So I think what you're gonna see soon is a couple of things. One, we at Stark kind of took a step back for a second and worked on cleaning up internally. So cleaning up our code, create parity across things, making sure we knew where data was coming from, and like we were controlling all touch points to make sure that like you want to have as little from the outside as possible, because you start to realize that you can't control those parameters that literally we just talked about. And so cleaning up shop and making sure data is beautiful and human readable, um, and that our business model is solidified. So we're putting on our big kid pants now, which is good, because Stark has snowballed quite quick, and I'm proud. I mean, at this point, over 250,000 people have used Stark, which is very nice. I'm proud of that. I'm grateful for that, for everyone. And there are things that people want and need. So for us, it's expanding out, the integration. So where you can find us, where are these tools sit, and also the what we allow you to design and build for. And so everything from like suggestions, so where you start to see your first touch point of intelligence with Star, to deep type analysis, to what does it look like to help you design and build for a screen reader, and having that baked into your workflow. Um, there's quite a few things for teams that are coming, which I will stay quiet on. And something a little secret, that I won't share, but I'm proud that uh, it will be what completely flips this fucking industry on its head. And more so the space and the way that the industry can succeed. I will say that. It will flip this space on its head. And I guess you can probably assume a little bit what that means, but it will definitely complete the Stark platform.
All right. Well, y'all heard it here. Follow getstark.co on all their social
Mm-hmm.
media so you can stay up to date with those developments.
Mm-hmm.
Kat, you're at I am Kat right? Or is it
No, no, my handle's stupid.
okay?
It's like in hindsight, this is the exact reason why it's dumb. So it's at and then I letters, literally letters. IMCATNOONE. I'm Cat Noone.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. There are very
All right.
few Noons on Twitter though, I have found. So if you type Cat Noone, I'd like to think I'm one of the first that you'd see pop up if you're in tech because algorithms. So
All right. Yeah, because yeah, hopefully you're following also feature disabled and or me.
yeah.
So you can probably get the algorithm to show you Cat's feed as well if you're following me.
Yeah.
So, anyways, thank you so much, Kat, for joining us. It's been an absolute
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you for
Um,
having me. I hope it was
yes, of
useful.
course. And next week is Juneteenth. Hopefully, I will have a guest joining me to talk about Juneteenth. We will definitely be talking about inclusive language for Pride and also for disabilities. So please join us next week for that. We'll see you all then. Bye.
Bye.